Welcome to New Europe Studios, where you can watch us make the news. We've got a World Cup coming up, and there's been several serious scandals in football, especially in the subject areas of match fixing, where criminal gangs have been arranging incidents in matches and the results of matches to make money. I'm here with Khalid Ali, who's fighting these people, and he's come to talk to us a little bit about how the betting industry and its associates are trying to deal with this scourge. So, Mr. Ali, could you tell me a little bit about what your organisation is and how it works?
Sure. I mean, ESSA was created back in 2005 on the back of the Heuser affair, which involved a German referee fixing matches for a Croatian mafia. And at the time, they were found to be putting bets on specific games. And it was all uncovered after a few years of investigation by the German authorities. And when they started to investigate the matter, they found that the state monopoly Oddset had lost X million amount of euros. And when they went to the online operators, they asked them, how much money did you lose? And they said, we didn't lose a penny. And they said, well, how is this possible? How come Oddset, which has all these retail outlets across Germany, lose so many millions and you haven't lost anything? They said, well, because everything online is fully traceable. As soon as you set up an account, you have to give details of who you are, passport details, credit card details. So in effect, what you're creating is a digital fingerprint. And as we know, criminals, they don't like to leave fingerprints. So as a result of that, a number of the big online operators decided to get together and to create an association whereby they could protect themselves from being defrauded, protect their customers, so they could then place a fair bet, and also protect sports, because of course the value of sport is in its fairness.
Yeah. I mean, this is one of the cases where everyone's interests are in a line. The fans want an honest game, the clubs want an honest game, the leagues want an honest game, and the bookmakers want an honest game. How well are you working together on this?
Well, I mean, as with any relationship, there's ups and downs. I mean, within the betting industry as well, itself, the regulated licensed betting industry, the private operators, we've been working very well. We have a common need to work together. We don't want to be defrauded. We don't want criminals stealing money from us. And of course, we want to protect our customers. But we also have to work with sport. They're vitally important in this chain. And over the last 6-7 years, we've been building relationships up with different sports federations. So we have now over 20 different memorandums of understanding with sports federations that if we see anything irregular, we can then pass that information on to the sports federation so they can then take action on this.
But if I'm right, the danger has been something that's taken a long time for people to realise the scope and the potential harm this can do, not just to businesses, but also to the sport itself. And so you're building up these links. I mean, how wide are these links with these other organisations now?
Well, I mean, they're wide and they're deep, in the sense that it's not just sports that we're speaking to, we're also speaking regulators. So we've signed memorandums of understanding with regulators across Europe, which including the UK Gambling Commission, Alderney, Gibraltar, Malta. We're speaking to a number of other regulators out there as well. Yeah. We've invested in an education program, which is extremely important. The betting industry was in fact the pioneers of a education program with our partners, the EU Athletes, which is an umbrella organisation of sports professionals across Europe. Last year, that particular project received funding from the European Commission, which means that it can be rolled out to 13 member countries and hit about 15,000 players. So we're extremely proud of that, because the challenges that we face are not coming from organised criminal gangs. They're far too savvy to come online and place bets. They will find other routes in the black markets where there's no transparency. The threats that we face are actually players who don't really know the rules of their game, or aren't aware that when they actually go online, people are actually watching what they're doing.
So the thing is that, I mean, many sportsmen are, of course, young males with a little bit of a taste for danger, a bit of risk and a bit of spare cash, and many of them do like a bit of a flutter themselves. So you're putting this education program in to explain to them when they should and should not bet ethically?
Well, absolutely. It's the do's and don'ts of sports betting. So, you know, don't ever bet on your own sport or the game that you're involved in.
Yeah.
Be very careful with what kind of information you pass on to your friends and family, insider information. So these are kind of the core principles of the betting, the education campaign. But actually, it's not just a code of conduct; it's actually much deeper than that. You have the athletes, former athletes, going into the changing rooms and speaking with the players about the risks of betting on their own sport. So it's really a grassroots campaign.
But also, I mean, when we look at the sums of money involved, we're looking at the World Cup, and some people are suggesting that up to maybe $1 billion could be gambled on this tournament alone. And I'm sure we can all understand how people would like to put a few euros on their local team or their favourite team during a match, or even during a match, because of the advent of proper sports betting now. What guarantees can you give them that their bets are safe? They obviously seem to be.
Well, if they bet with the regulated, licensed operators, the ones that I represent, they're regulated. They're regulated in the market that they have the license. So there's a lot of protection there. Plus, they're part of an early warning system, which is ESSA, which we all feed this information into the sports, different sports federations or regulators where we have to. So I'm absolutely 100% confident that if they were to place bets with our members, they wouldn't face any problems at all, of course.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking about, you represent all of the pretty much all of the big names in the sport. We're not here to advertise separate brands, but if you have a look at on any of the bookmakers' websites that you may be considering having a little wager on, it should be quite obvious as to whether they're in these associations that help guarantee the security and the honesty of the system.
Look, you know, when you go and you place a bet, you're going to go with the recognised big name brands, and they're all members of ESSA.
Okay. And I just want to say, it's just how big is the effort that you're putting into sports security and keeping games honest?
Well, we can't keep the games honest. That's the first thing to say. That's up to the sportsmen and women who are playing the game. It's up to the sports federations to make sure they have the right governance principles in place. What we can do from our part is to monitor what is going on with the betting patterns. Now, if we find anomalies where a weak team is suddenly being bet on, it triggers an alarm. Or we see that bets are coming from one region in particular in a certain short space of time, or if new accounts are being created for a particular event. These are all signals which tell us something is wrong, and then we will collate the information from all our members, and then when we have enough evidence there, we'll pass that information on to the relevant sports that might be affected.
But I mean, given the global nature of the business and of bettors, you must have some extremely sophisticated systems to track what are millions of small transactions.
Absolutely. All our members have the most sophisticated systems in place, from understanding who their customers are, KYC principles, understanding what their transactions are, know your transactions, from the tools that they use when players are registering for their accounts, to geolocation tools as well. There is a lot of security that goes into protecting the betting operator from being defrauded. Because at the end of the day, in the short term, if there is match fixing, sports will have their reputation damaged, but in the short term, it's the bookmaker that is actually losing money. In the long term, if match fixing is persistent in sport, you'll find that sports will be damaged financially because people will stop advertising or attending those matches. Long term, the betting industry will also be damaged financially and reputationally as well, because people will stop placing bets.
Yeah, I mean, there are signs that this sort of thing has happened in one or two places where match fixing has not been sort of tackled with the gravitas that you would like. So what I would like to ask you really is, if enforcement sometimes can be the problem, what would you like to see? And we're in Brussels now, so what would you like to see more from the European Union?
Well, the European Union has been relatively active in this topic, especially in the last few years. The Commission has come out with a number of proposals, it's come out with an action plan, is now currently doing a number of studies into this area. I think one of the areas which has to be looked into is the role of police forces, and also criminal sanctions for match fixing. In some countries, they're not as high as they could be. So these are some of the potential areas or avenues that the EU needs to look at. They have done this. I mean, they've been doing studies and they are continuing to do studies, but that's where we're at the moment.
I mean, in some cases, this must be an extremely difficult crime to prosecute, given that you could have a syndicate of 20 people in 20 different countries committing the crimes through bookmakers in 20 further different countries. Is it the complexity that's sometimes putting people off?
Well, I think that's one of the issues. I mean, it is extremely complicated. I mean, the recent Bochum case, which has been investigated, where there was 300-400 matches under suspicion. I mean, that all came about because the police were originally investigating a prostitution ring, and when they did the wiretaps, they found out this is actually linked to something more, which was the whole match fixing case. So that's how that came about. So it is a very complicated web. It does feed into other areas of criminality, but yeah, there has to be a stronger response from the law enforcement agencies on this, and they need to see this as a serious crime.
Now, the other thing that perhaps will surprise people is that this is something that happens throughout all different levels of the sport, and I find it kind of quite strange that some kind of obscure little sub-league can be as open to these dangers as, say, we've even had questions over some World Cup qualifiers in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things here. There's the regulated licensed side, which is the members that I represent, and then there's the unlicensed black market side. Now, if you're an operator who's regulated and licensed, you know what the risks are when you're offering an event, which means that if you go to a third division Bulgarian game, the amount that you can actually win is not going to be very substantial. Whereas, if you go to the black market, those limits probably don't exist. So we need to find a balance here. We need to have a much more open, regulated system, starting in Europe and then looking to other countries. I know there's a number of issues where, moral or religious reasons why certain countries don't want to open up their markets, but until they do, they're just going to have a huge black market, and it's going to be very easy for criminals to work in those conditions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming in and explaining this. As I said before, with the World Cup coming up, many people will be having a little bit of a wager. And what we've learned today is that if you do it through the regulated, for the big name systems, not on the black market, you will be safer. And also that this is a crime that feeds into other crimes. These criminals are not just match fixers, they're into all sorts of other activities as well. And should this not be tackled properly, the risk is not just to businesses like the bettors, but also businesses like the clubs, and also when it affects people, the fans, who will not go and watch a match or follow a team they think might be being paid off. So thank you for joining us at New Europe Studios today, and thank you Mr. Khalid Ali from ESSA, who's been talking very informatively about sports betting. Thank you very much.